Brad Marchand has a pretty decent postseason resume. And what does Jakob Chychrun's extension with Washington mean for the D market?
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Wednesday, March 26th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Moneyman12. Follow show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers and on Blue Sky at LOFLA Panthers. You can follow the podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. Subscribe, and if you're on the YouTube, press that like button down below. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. So, Panther fans, we have a jam-packed show today discussing what a sweet spot will be for the Florida Panthers for us to feel good for them heading into the postseason. What Brad Marchand's resume is in the postseason and how it can contribute to the Panthers, and Jakob Chychrun's extension with the Washington Capitals and what that means for the D market and a possible pending UFA for the Florida Panthers. And here to discuss that all with me on today's edition of the show, it's Wednesday, which means it's Winans Wednesday. Jacob Winans is back. And Jacob, welcome back to the show. And it's another week where you and I are discussing things in the world of the Florida Panthers on a little bit of an extended break for this team.
Yeah, the schedule makers kind of gave the Panthers a weird little stretch here, so we'll make the most of it. But happy that we got to go into this little break with a win, which was nice against Pittsburgh, a game that didn't look clean necessarily the whole time, and the Panthers are kind of sort of just struggling their way through some of these games, but. Important thing is just putting points in the bank right now with a lot of guys on the shelf getting healthy, hopefully for a postseason run. So eyes on the prize. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah, and I go into this little break with like a little iffy because of how much they had to push through, and we haven't necessarily seen that game where the Panthers have just won comfortably as of late, ever really since Vitek Vanacek's first start against Buffalo. So, what I want to pose this question to you. There's 11 games left. Florida, Toronto, and Tampa Bay all have 11 games. Both Toronto and Tampa Bay won their games tonight. Toronto does own the tiebreaker, so the Panthers winning in the shootout against the Penguins has them behind the Leafs as far as the tie-breaking scenarios. And it's crazy. There's a lot of similarities within the last two regular seasons in the last 8 games for the Panthers, where they went 6-1-1 in 2023, including losing the last 2, and then 5-2-1. Last year included an Eastern Canadian trip. Both years had a shutout against the Columbus Blue Jackets. Both had a home game against the Buffalo Sabres in there. A home date with Ottawa last year with a 7-2 result, and then a shutout in one. A home date with the Leafs both times, and a little bit of a different wrinkle with getting Detroit twice in this stretch. But the benefit of the Panthers here is, Jacob, is that in their last 11 games, Panthers have 6 of them at home, 2 back-to-backs, while Toronto has 4 of them at home, and then Tampa Bay has 5 of them at home. And FanDuel looked up the odds today. They still have the Panthers as the favorite to win the Atlantic Division at -135, while Toronto is +185 and Tampa Bay 480. What do you think of those odds when I'm reading them out to you right here?
Yeah, I find it a little bit surprising given the guys the Panthers have out. I and just kind of the way they've been playing lately. I don't think out of the 3 teams, I think the Panthers are probably least likely to really empty the tank to try to win the division. Even though I feel like they should push as hard as possible to win the division. I think out of the 3 that are really in the running for it, I think the Panthers are the least likely to be concerned about matchups and home ice and things like that. Of course, that's not to say they don't want it, but they're not gonna risk injury. They're not gonna risk. They're really not gonna go over the top trying to get that, because they're a confident team that feels they can beat anybody. With that said, I do think that they will win the division. I have a feeling they're going to pull it out. They've kind of had a knack for doing that the past couple of years. When they need to win the big games, they just have a tendency to do so, even with guys in and out of the lineup. So I think they're going to win the division. If you ask me how many games I feel like they need to win to do that out of these last 11, probably 7.
Yeah.
I'd say roughly 7, especially given that it's really division heavy down the stretch. It was kind of a sort of torn for me between 7 and 8. I think 8 might be asking a lot, but I think 7 out of the last 11 probably gets the job done, and I'd feel comfortable at that number. So yeah, I think they will win the division. I don't think it's going to be easy. I think it might be another situation where it comes down to the last game. But not as much as the issue for me with winning the division. It's not so much that they get the easiest matchup in the first round, because as Panther fans, we know an 8 seed is capable of doing a lot. Doesn't matter, or a 7 seed. The 8 seed would go to Washington, but it doesn't really matter whether it's a 7 or an 8 or a wild card team. Anyone who's in the playoffs is good enough to win rounds, is good enough to go the distance. So I'm not really concerned as much about the matchups. Home ice isn't that huge of a deal for me, because the Panthers have a style that travels well. We've seen how well they've played on the road, especially opening series when they were the 8 seed and stole road games, and that turned their entire postseason in the right direction. For me, it's mostly I just want Tampa and Toronto to have to beat up on each other in the first place.
Yeah.
That is the most important thing to me, is those two teams. One of them will not be a problem for you. And it's a different road having to go through both of those teams versus only having to go through one of them.
Yeah. At the same time, though, I do believe now with if they, in the case that if they do win the division, even if Ottawa does have a little bit of inexperience on their roster, what they've done as far as like 1, 2, and 3 on their centers now, with the trade of Dylan Cousins, having Stützle on the top for them, and then what they've done as far as like transitioning with like signing a Claude Giroux, now like helping guys get through, and now towards the end of his contract, he's towards the bottom of the lineup on a wing position, kind of like what Jordan Staal is in Carolina, kind of like helping out some young players there. Number 1 defenseman in Jake Sanderson. Linus Ullmark feels like a missing piece. And let's not forget the Brady Tkachuk factor. He's more of a wrecking ball than Matthew Tkachuk with the hits category there as well. So it's not like it's going to be an easy series for the Panthers whatsoever. And I mean, it's obviously, with them coming off a Stanley Cup run, it's the least amount of pressure. I mean, if Toronto is a first round exit, I think Mitch Marner is as good as gone. And to think that they have more decisions there on who their starting goaltender is going to be with. I don't think Craig Berube is going to go flip-flopping with Stolarz and Wall, learning from his assistant in Jim Montgomery from what he did in Boston. So I think that really for the Panthers, it's just for them. They're going to have it tough regardless. And I think that Ottawa, even though they're not Stanley Cup favorites, they are a team that I do believe that is going to be such a really tough out. It's not going to be it's not going to be a sweep. It could probably go maybe even 6 games against Ottawa if they were to match up. If I were to predict a matchup today, but we still have a few weeks for them to go.
Yeah, there's a couple intriguing matchups there that the Panthers could draw, even if it's not Tampa or Toronto. It could be Ottawa. Ottawa would be a really, really tough out. I agree with you. They've got some guys on that team that don't have playoff experience, but you just kind of get the sense that when they get to the playoffs, they're the type of players who are going to perform when they get there.
No doubt.
Brady Tkachuk being the biggest example of that. They're a team with a really, really high amount of young talent. They've got good goaltending in Ullmark. Didn't necessarily prove that against the Panthers in the playoffs when they went up against him, but he's a great goaltender. So that's a team that can make some noise in the playoffs. Plus, they haven't played postseason hockey in a long time. They're young, they've got fresh legs, they're a hungry team. That's far from an easy out. It could go 6, it could go 7. The games that you do win are going to be close games. It's going to be that would be a tense series. Montreal's still in the mix. That's a team that people forget. There's some deep playoff experience in that group. Just a few years ago, before they started their sort of accelerated rebuild, a lot of those guys are gone. Yes, but that's a team that has some serious playoff experience. They've got a couple of guys on that team who've played for Paul Maurice, know the system. There's that could be a tough out. And then you look at some of the Metro wildcard options, Columbus, the Islanders, the Rangers, even hanging around. I mean, there's really no easy outs this year. It's kind of it's all the wildcard options are teams that they have flaws, they have deficiencies, but they also have a lot of things that could if everything goes right, they could contend. So it's the matchups are. I'd put less stock in the matchups this year than most years. It doesn't really matter. It's going to be tough regardless.
Yeah, and if there were to be a battle of Florida, Vasilevsky is coming off a season where he's not having a surgery. You a little bit younger in Jake Gensel for them. McDonough's back and we saw what that blue line was when he was gone for just 1 year when he was in Nashville there. So it's just once again going to be a tough out for the Panthers when they do get to the postseason. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where we're going to discuss Brad Marchand and what his postseason resume is, and what is there a possibility of also him playing on that top line. We're going to discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. And you just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, all you need is Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the candidates faster. And now you can speed up your process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Once again, you could go to Indeed.com right now and support our show by saying you heard about it on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring Indeed is all you need. Segment number 2 here on this Wednesday, March 26th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Winans Wednesday edition of the show. Jacob Winans is here. And Jacob, it's Brad Marchand. It's still crazy to think that Brad Marchand is a Florida Panther. We still haven't seen him in we've only seen him in a practice setting wearing a practice jersey, and still no update on his possible return to the lineup. Maybe we see him later this week when the Panthers take the ice for practice. So maybe this would be the good time to get him possibly on some line rushes. But I just looked up more and more of just what Brad Marchand has done during the postseason. 157 games played, 56 goals, 82 assists. Shooting percentage is a little lower than what the regular season is, but 13 game-winning goals. I mean, you think about for Brad Marchand adding that mix, and then when you think about a struggling Carter Verhaeghe this year, you still don't count someone like Carter Verhaeghe out, and then but adding that clutch factor in Brad Marchand, it still gives you a whole bunch of options for this Florida Panthers team at their forward groups. And you just think about the different scenarios and the different situations that Brad Marchand has gotten himself in, even going back to his first postseason. Both games 6 and 7 against the Vancouver Canucks, including 2 goals in game 7 and 1 assist, 5 total points in the last 2 games to clinch a championship for the Bruins. Even though his numbers took a dip in 2013, an overtime winner in game 1 against the New York Rangers off a neutral zone steal, beat Zuccarello on the back check and then beats Lundqvist. and just looking at this, of just not just the off, just not just the post whistle antics for Brad Marchand, but what he does as far as like uh, battling along the boards, playing up his size, uh, getting to the net front. I just think that this is just, once again, just looking at the highlights for him, it just brings me so much excitement for when he does hit the ice for the Panthers, which we still don't know when. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, he's such an excellent fit for what this team does. It's kind of a match made in heaven, and like you said, there's so many options. There's really no wrong place you can put him, and that's a credit to him and his play style. Um, which as Panther fans, we probably never thought we'd be sitting here on a on a podcast complimenting Brad Marchand,
Yeah,
pumping his tires at all. But the fact that he's a Panther now, it really is a match made in heaven. Because if you look at the different options, you can he's gritty enough where if everything, and this I don't think would ever happen, but if everything is humming with the top nine, the top three lines are just perfectly meshing, gelling. You don't want to disrupt it. He's a guy who can make an impact in a fourth line role if you needed him to. He could come in on the third line, play with Anton Lundell and Etu, and you're gonna see production. You're gonna see two-way play. He adds a little bit of grit that and a little bit of a pest mentality that neither of those two guys has, or neither of those two guys have. Uh, our Finns tend to be a little bit more mild mannered and aren't really into the rough stuff. You put Marchand on that line, it instantly elevates the energy. You could put him on a second line with Bennett and Kachuk, and you've got the ultimate rat line. The line that's going to piss off every opponent. They're going to score. They're going to be in your face. They're going to be talking. Everyone's least favorite line to play against. You could put him on the top line, and like you said, build a Panthers version of the perfection line. Barkov for years has been talked about as the next Bergeron. Brad Marchand has spent most of his playing days playing on a wing with on Patrice Bergeron's wing. You put him with Barkov, it's almost you can almost get the same thing. And then Sam Reinhart is a bona fide sniper. He's a guy who can score from anywhere. He's got one of the best wrist shots, one of the best one-timers in the league. He's a guy who can produce offensively. Definitely better defensive game than Pastrnak, but he's that caliber of a goal scorer and a shooter. So you could generate a Panthers version of the perfection line. So Marchand gives you unlimited options as far as the forward lines go, and I don't think there's a wrong fit for him. It'll be interesting to see what the best fit is for him, but there's no bad options. You can put him anywhere in the lineup, and he's going to produce.
yeah, and even though the Boston Bruins took a little bit of a dip this year, I mean his the clutch goals are just even as recent as last year against the Toronto Maple Leafs in games 3 and 4, getting both the GWGs and a run to the Stanley Cup final in 2019. He got another one in Game 3 against the Carolina Hurricanes, which is another one of those sweeps in an Eastern Conference final for Carolina there. Using a screen for Jake DeBrusk and a puck off of Calvin DeHaan to get it past Curtis McElhinney there in 2019. But yeah, there's options for Brad Marchand because it doesn't, that when you talk about the Finns just now with not getting much into the rough stuff, you allow Marchand to get in there, and if someone tries to even take a run at the superstar players, you know that you have them there to defend them as well. Although I do think that Brad Marchand is at the end of the day a rental for the Panthers here. It's just you're leaving. Not necessarily no doubt because the Stanley Cup playoffs are anything can happen in this tournament, but you're giving yourself more of that chance and saying, hey, you're giving you want to give your fan base and your team, okay, you're gonna have to scramble the lines from time to time. There are going to be a little bit of lulls throughout, and like we spoke last week, Mackie Samoskevich has you know with his flexibility, he's not there just yet but from his inexperience. And even though I had Marchand as starting on the third line with Mackie Samoskevich on the second line, if the playoffs were to start today, that's something we discussed last week. But again, I could see him. I could also see an opportunity where if things go wrong, you just need that little bit of scoring punch on the net front, because he is more likely to go to the net and get those second chance opportunities than Carter Hagee, where Carter Hagee is more of that distance shooter, where it's more perimeter based in the postseason. So I think that's why when you think of that Marchand line, especially with how given goes, how well that works, that could also be another option that I believe Marchand and Barkov could work well together.
Yeah, definitely, because so much of being a winger on a line with a guy like Barkov or guys like him and Reinhardt, um, so much of that is mental. It's not just about your ability to shoot or your ability to stick handle. So much of that is about knowing where the puck is going to be, knowing what Barkov's best option is, knowing what Reinhardt's best option is, because you have to trust those guys that they're going to take their best option, and you have to be there to make that play. We talk about it all the time, and I know we discussed this when the Panthers first signed Evan Rodriguez. Was uh, He's not a flashy player. He's probably not going to put up 60, 70 points, even if he is on the top line. But he's been a line mate of Sidney. He had been a line mate of Sidney Crosby. He'd been a line mate of Nathan McKinnon. He knows how to play with great players and do his job well enough where they can excel. Brad Marchand is that type of guy at the highest level. He's played with Bergeron. He's played with Pastrnak. He's played with so many great players, and he knows how to let them do what they do best and how to get the best out of them as a complementary player, which is generally what a winger is. He can drive play, absolutely. He can dazzle, and he can be the superstar himself, definitely. But as a winger, your ultimate goal is to get the best out of your center and let your center be the one driving that line, and you're supposed to be the complement to your center. And I think you're going to have a hard time finding a guy who's better at doing that than Brad Marchand. He's got an elite hockey IQ, and he complements his centers really well. And just look at his production and look at the centers he's played with the past couple of seasons since the retirement of Bergeron and Krejci. I mean, he's gotten the best out of Charlie Coyle. He's gotten the best out of Pavel Zacha. He's gotten the best out of Morgan Geekie. I mean, these aren't guys who are exactly torching the NHL over the last few seasons, but Marchand's on their wing, and they start to play the best hockey they've played. It's not a coincidence. So I think you put him with Barkov or Bennett or any of those guys. I really think any of the Panthers' top three centers would be the number one center in Boston. And I don't think it's a stretch to say that. So Marchand would be having an upgrade no matter who his center is if you put him on any of the top three lines. So it's really exciting. Rental or not, we should get hopefully 20 plus 30 games of somewhere between 20 and 30 games. Hopefully they make quick work of some playoff opponents and keep that number down. But we should get some really, really incredible hockey out of Marchand, even if it is a short time. I think it's a match made in heaven here.
Yeah. So let's hope that time is a long playoff run for him, and can't wait to see how he mixes in. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we're going to discuss a little bit of an extension for a defenseman outside of the Florida Panthers, and what does that mean for the D market and a certain pending UFA for a Panthers defenseman. We'll discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Trade Coffee. If you're like me, your mornings have to start with a good cup of coffee, but I got tired of settling for grocery store brands that just weren't cutting it. That's why I turned to Trade. And let me tell you, the coffee is next level. Trade is the number one specialty marketplace in the U.S., bringing you fresh coffee from over 50 of the country's top roasters. Their experts have taste tested thousands of coffees, curating over 450 amazing roasts. Whether you're new to coffee or know exactly what you'd like, they'll handpick the perfect match for you. And I just took their quiz, and in under a minute, they matched me with a roast that was fresh, smelled incredible, and tasted even better. My first bag was a game changer, and it had a smooth, rich flavor, and I could actually taste the difference from my usual coffee. The subscription makes it easy. No more last-minute grocery store runs or settling for whatever is on the shelf. Right now, Trade is exclusively offering our listeners 40% off your first order at drinktrade.com/locked on NHL. That's drinktrade, TRADE.com/locked on NHL for 40% off your first order. Drinktrade.com/locked on NHL. Segment 3 here on this Wednesday, March 26th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Wednesday here with Jacob Winans here. And so Jacob, it's funny because when the extension for Jakob Chychrun was announced by the Washington Capitals, which was a 8 times 9 million for our audience here, we both on our group chat actually put it at the same time, a little bit of a jinx, but I mean, you can't owe me a soda because I don't drink soda. Only water and coffee are the only things I consume. But Jakob Chychrun, long-term extension, left-handed shot. Boca Raton native. Want to first of all say congratulations to him, and of course former Panthers color analyst Jeff Chychrun for a life-changing contract for his son there. And a little bit of a nice transition that Chychrun is going to have in Washington when John Carlson's contract expires. They're going to be out of their LTIR money with the contracts of Nicholas Backstrom, TJ Oshie come next season. To think that they're having so much success here, and one of their final pieces isn't even there yet with Ryan Leonard, who's playing for Boston College, who's in the NCAA tournament this year, which we'll talk about NCAA tournament hockey later on this week that will begin this weekend. But I just wonder what it means more for the defense market for the NHL. And Jakob Chychrun is getting this contract extension as a left-handed shot for him. So I'm wondering more and more what this means for teams who are desperate for right-handed shot options, with what Aaron Ekblad is. So when you heard about that number, what popped into your head when you thought about the market as a whole coming up?
Yeah, well, things definitely. The first one was that's awesome for the growth of hockey in South Florida. I think that instantly makes him the highest paid former Florida Junior Panther of all time. So that's a big success for the
Yeah,
program there. That's huge. Boca Raton native, a South Florida kid. You wish he could have been a Panther before securing a life-changing contract that's going to keep him in Washington for a long time. But that's my other hometown team, so I'm happy for him, and that's going to be great for his career. He's a guy who's been subject to trade rumors and been traded a couple of times and seems to always be on the move. So having that security is big. So happy for the Chychrun family. The next thing was immediately, this is bad news if you want to keep Aaron Ekblad.
mm-hmm.
No other way to put it. This is that's a market setter. It's something we see a lot in football. It's you want to get your guys re-signed before another guy on a different team completely resets the market. Not necessarily that Chychrun reset the market, but for at least this upcoming unrestricted free agency class of D-men, anyone with comparable numbers and with comparable impact, left or right hand, is going to get something that's sort of measured against the Chychrun deal right there. And you expect that you add $1 million or $2 million for a right shot defenseman automatically. They come at a premium. It's not great if you're the Panthers and you want to keep Aaron Ekblad long term. So it's definitely a good thing they get Seth Jones if they see him as the top pair right shot D-man. That's, at least you have that security. But I think the ideal way this plays out is having Ekblad and Jones in your top four, anchoring the right side. Jones is better in a second pair role. Not to say he can't be a top pair defenseman. He has been before. And if you give him time in the system, Panthers have done some incredible things with D-men. So I'm not saying he's not a top pair caliber defenseman. It's just Forsling has been at his best with Ekblad. You'd like to keep him if possible. It just got a lot more difficult today. Absolutely.
Yeah. And there was a tweet put out by Cesar Lucero, which big congratulations to Cesar as well for his new show that he launched, the Big C's show. So congratulations to him there. And he shared a tweet about Paul Maurice's comments about just Seth Jones and just his progression and what that means for Aaron Ekblad and the future, just because of his praise. And um, I don't want to overthink that quote from Paul Maurice neither, because he's not the one who negotiates the contracts neither. He obviously he wants to keep both of them at a reasonable number for both sides, but it's got to fit the Panthers now and the future, which a lot of people were saying, why didn't they sign Brandon Montour? They didn't have the money at the time. Thankfully the LTIR money opened up that option for a Seth Jones to fit now and into the future. So it's got to make sense in that aspect for the Panthers here. And it's going to be a bit of a squeeze for the Cats here, if they want to bring Aaron Ekblad back. I mean, if Jones is the number one at 7 million, that's easier to swallow. But at the same time, if Aaron Ekblad does walk away, uh, but at the same time, if he signs a $9 million deal for 7 years, that would make 63 million for him. So in because the Panthers give him that 8th year, once again, it gives them that luxury to lower the AAV. That's that for Aaron Ekblad, and I don't think he's going to be a $10 million guy. But if the Panthers do decide to not pony up a similar offer, it's not rich when it comes to right-handed shot options. I mean, Cody Ceci and David Savard are more third pair guys, and we've seen Cody Ceci struggle when elevated into a bigger role with Miro Heiskanen being out. Uh, I think that the Winnipeg Jets would try to extend Neil Pionk. They do have a lot of cap space actually coming up in this coming season. If they do want to go a little bit of a stopgap route with just a 1-year term on a 40-year-old Brent Burns who is very durable, and then reevaluate in 2026 when they do have more money, maybe that's an option, because there's talk about Brent Burns still wanting to play past this year. But also, there's another right-handed shot that I kind of looked into. Maybe and it is a lot younger, a two-way defenseman, Dante Fabro for the Columbus Blue Jackets, claimed off of waivers from the Nashville Predators and a former first-round pick. So maybe that's a guy who is another one of those guys who maybe didn't pan out somewhere else, which actually Columbus, ever since he's been with Columbus, he's a plus 18. And Columbus will have a lot of money to spend this offseason. And with everything that they've accomplished this year, despite maybe falling short of the playoffs, it's probably going to be more of a destination this year, more than ever, probably. So maybe that's a player that the Panthers pony up for. But again, what the Panthers are going to calculate is what other teams are going to offer versus what they can, versus getting that 8th year. And it's like, this is what we got. This is what we can give you.
Yeah, it's going to be tricky to navigate, but keep in mind the Panthers do have a couple things in their favor here. So you have that 8th year that you can offer, which is huge. You've got the state tax advantage. So what other teams may offer, you could come in at a couple million less and still have the same amount in real money. So that's always a big advantage when it comes to the Panthers. Look at the deals that Sam Reinhart got, look at Barkov, look at Tkachuk. They all would have gotten more money elsewhere as far as AAV goes, but they're making the same amount of money here. That's well understood. And then you also, when comparing Ekblad to Chychrun, you've got the age factor and the injury history factor. Ekblad has a pretty extensive injury history. He's a little bit older. His deal would carry him into a much later stage of his career than Chychrun's it will. So you have that going for you. Exactly. You've got that going for you as far as a negotiating tactic. So it's not a lost cause by any means. If the Panthers end up deciding, we can't match the offers that Ekblad's going to get on the open market, got to pivot in another direction. I think Brent Burns is a perfectly fine option for a year. I think Dante Fabro definitely. I just kind of feel like Columbus is going to keep him around. I think they can afford to overpay a little bit if necessary. They're going to keep him. Pionk is an interesting one because they definitely have money to spend. Winnipeg is not a destination franchise necessarily, even though they're a really, really good team right now. By all accounts in the players' polls and everything, Winnipeg is probably it's one of the least desired franchises to play for factors outside of hockey. Factors like the airport and cost of living and
quality of life,
tax situation, quality of life. There's just not a whole lot to do there. So if a guy like Neil Pionk is considering Winnipeg versus Florida, you give it your best shot. So there's some intriguing options. I don't think any of them are as good as Ekblad, but the money and term have to make sense. And the Panthers, whoever they end up with, they're a team that's going to make the most out of it. But yeah, it's I don't necessarily expect to see anything done before the playoffs, though. I think it's for Washington. It was smart to get it done now, but it is somewhat rare to see deals like that happen this late in the season for teams that are contending and trying to sort of keep a championship contending core together. You don't usually see that kind of deal done right before the playoffs. So kudos to Washington for getting it done. And I don't know if you saw this about Chychrun today, but no light bulbs in his house.
Yes.
Not sure if you saw that.
Beeswax candles.
Yeah, beeswax candles. So if beeswax candles instead of light bulbs is gonna get me $72 million, I think I'm gonna throw out all of my lights and I'm just gonna have beeswax candles everywhere and hope that turns into 72 mil somewhere.
Yeah, that was a pretty cool story that Dylan Strome ratted him out a little bit, if you want to call it ratting him out there. But nice, interesting story. But also one thing with Neil Pionk is he's playing some power play 2 minutes behind Josh Morrissey. So that's a power play option where you have both number 1 and 2 if Seth Jones does eventually become the number 1 guy, which actually this is what we expected the whole time. And right now it's happened earlier than expected due to the suspension. And it's working out quite well, which we'll actually maybe go into a deeper dive of why the Panthers power play is just succeeding over the last few weeks. But we're gonna park this episode. But Jacob, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Tell everybody where they can follow you online, my friend.
Yep, you can follow me on X at Jacob Winans 8. And yeah, hopefully see some of you guys at the arena. We got playoff hockey coming soon. So it's that time of year.
Absolutely. See you next week, my friend.
Looking forward to it. Thanks.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL Network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Jacob Winans, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.